What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here, PackersNews.com. The news breaking this afternoon that Green Bay is bringing back cornerback Davon House on another one-year deal, much as they did last season. Davon House obviously will give them some veteran depth at the cornerback position. I wouldn't think this would preclude them from obviously looking at cornerbacks early in the draft still, but it does help keep them out of the paint, so to speak, not boxed into having to take a corner anywhere early in the draft. Much like the Jari Evans signing last year, it allows them some flexibility. Now that said, House clearly had an up and down year last year, probably more down than up. He had stretches of good play punctuated by interceptions, surrounded by long stretches of inconsistent play and getting beat deep on several touchdowns. Clearly, like I said, this is a signing meant to bolster a position of weakness. It gives them options in the draft, but it certainly doesn't rule anything out. Now, that said, say they don't go corner early, maybe even second day, third day. I expect a lot of these young guys already on the roster, such as Lindsey Pipkins, Donatello Brown, etc., to give House a run for his money. At a one-year deal, we don't know the money yet, but you have to think it's probably in or around near the veterans minimum, maybe a skosh above that. Makes it really easy to cut him at the end of camp if some of the young guys start developing and they deem him, unnecessary. So while not a sexy pickup, I understand, it does help the Packers. All players have value, and you do have to look at the scheme switch. You got to think House would be asked to play a lot more man coverage, a lot more bump and run, which is kind of his forte. So it's an understandable signing. I said at the beginning of the offseason, for this team to become a championship defense, they had to move on from Davon House. I still maintain that. I think he is a perfect stopgap talent for you to get through a season, which they did last year. The fact that it's a one-year deal would suggest that they continue to look to upgrade at the position, but veteran depth on board for the Packers. Now go sign Breeland and we're good, says Christopher. Well, got to think it's still a possibility. I wouldn't think a one-year deal would preclude them from signing anybody. But, there's a good chance that they may end here at the cornerback position in free agency and look towards the draft. But we've got 2 weeks until the draft starts. Maybe there'll be a surprise signing between now and then. I could play corner better than him. Give me a shot. I would really love NFL fans to be able to go out on a field in full pads and take a rep or two someday just to see how impossible it is to do the things that NFL players do. Alan says, I'm okay with House back for depth. Yeah, I mean, it's a depth signing. That's exactly what it is. It's insurance. Nothing more, nothing less. You look at who the Eagles had on hand as their starting cornerbacks last year at the start of the season. It was not like they went through any great shakes there at the cornerback spot, and they went on to win the Super Bowl. And I'm not suggesting that the Packers are at that level yet, especially a lot of work to be done in the pass rush. But, Davon House gives you another veteran who's going to come in and compete, and be able to disrupt wide receivers at the line of scrimmage. Clearly has extensive experience covering NFL wide receivers. I highly doubt he starts. I would think if the depth chart remains as it is right now at corner, I would tend to think Tramon Williams would get the nod on one perimeter spot. Kevin King would get the nod on the other. There's no risk in this, and it doesn't force the Packers' hand early in the draft. I absolutely agree. Any updates on Aaron's contract? Nothing, Cindy. At the moment, I know that they continue to talk. There's been no significant movement. I think earlier this week, I would suspect that Rodgers and his camp will wait for Matt Ryan's deal to get done. That's the final quarterback domino that has to fall, so to speak, until they can kind of look at the landscape of quarterback contracts, including Kirk Cousins' fully guaranteed deal, for them to start even working on the nitty-gritty of the structure of the contract. But I do know that they have spoken. They have had preliminary talks. I don't doubt that they've, approached just the beginnings of a framework for the deal. But, like I said, I would be surprised if anything happened prior to Matt Ryan being signed by Atlanta. Any news on Davis after his arrest? Nothing, Nicole. The Packers made their statement, obviously, that they were gathering information. I tend to think they'll let him come to camp and compete. I think he's spot on his hold on a roster spot was already tenuous. This certainly doesn't help it. You can bet, the NFL will be looking into it. He could possibly face some kind of discipline there. I think he'll get to compete this summer, but I also think there's a good chance that he gets cut if they end up drafting someone and or we see development from some of the other young guys. I agree with Lewis. Do you think Rodgers is unhappy with the Packers? Russell, I talked about that on my podcast today. Make sure you check that at packersnews.com. I also spoke about it a little bit yesterday here on Facebook, so I won't go into it too much today, but I will say I think there's definitely some, there's no question he's a little sore about the fact that they have not talked to him about some of these personnel moves, moves with the coaching staff, etc. But by week one, when things kick off, this will be nothing but a lot of off-season noise. He's a professional. He knows what's up. He knows the Packers are going to make him the highest paid player in the NFL. And he's got 2 years left on his deal, after which the Packers could realistically use the franchise tag 2 more times after that. So that's 4 years of control the Packers have. The only leverage Rodgers would have if he was truly upset with the team and wanted to force his way out would be to sit and, demand a trade, so to speak. And then things would get ugly and the Packers would demand an absolute ransom, which no one would probably pay. But I don't think it's ever going to come even close to any of that. And I know there are people who dismiss it and say the media is making too much of it. And I don't think, you can say that's being overblown on our end, at least here at PackersNews.com. I know my colleague Tom Silverstein is about to drop a piece about just the concept of, Rodgers and having a say in personnel decisions. But if you're completely dismissing it, I think you're naive. House will be cut before the end of training camp. That's a possibility, Ron. I actually just put that up on Twitter. There's a good chance that he gets beat out by a Lindsey Pipkins even, or maybe a young draft pick. I think he's definitely a good signing at this time of year because he's most likely very cheap. He brings veteran experience, a guy who's played a lot of snaps at a position you are a little thin at. So bring him in. Undoubtedly, it's a very minimal contract money-wise. It's a 1-year deal. If you cut him before week 1, you don't have to pay him anything. So it makes sense. Do we miss a bargain with Jordan Matthews who signed for $1 million? It's possible. My hunch is, and I haven't been able to get confirmation on this, but my hunch is the Packers medical staff probably saw something that they didn't like. He's coming off 2 pretty significant injuries. His tape last year was pretty poor as well. And you put those things together, I don't doubt that they pitched come play for Green Bay and work with Aaron Rodgers. I haven't heard that they made an offer at all. We know obviously that the Cardinals and the Patriots did. The Cardinals offered about 1.5. The Patriots obviously got him for $1 million. My hunch is if the Packers did make an offer, maybe they came in even below that, as is their notorious reputation. But he's going to go play with Tom Brady. He's going to go get to play against the Bills twice a year. Did they miss out on a bargain? Possibly, but I don't think it's the difference between them getting to the Super Bowl and missing out on a championship. I think he could have been a nice complimentary piece, but I don't think he's a game changer by any stretch of the imagination. Would drafting Lamar Jackson or any highly rated quarterback prospect give the team leverage in negotiating with Aaron Rodgers? Yes and no. It might piss him off, right? And then make things a little bit more difficult. They've got all the leverage as far as, having control of his rights. He's signed up, like I just said, he's signed up for 2 years. He's got 2 years left on his deal. After that, they can use the franchise tag at least twice before it becomes truly cost prohibitive. So, they've got the leverage they need. I don't think they need to go send a message or anything like that by drafting a quarterback. Hi, Keith. How are you? Dan says they totally missed out on a bargain. Same with Cook. They saved money they never spent. Well, they just spent money. They just signed Davon House at the cornerback position. I love how everyone always kind of, it's always in a vacuum. There's a salary cap. They're working under those constraints, and they felt they were sufficiently staffed, so to speak, at the wide receiver spot. They needed a little help at corner. They made that signing. They didn't make the signing at wide receiver. There's nothing that Jordan Matthews is going to do that Geronimo Allison or D'Angelo Yancey even aren't going to be able to provide the Packers within their offense. Move up to 5 or 6. Whew, Mark, that would be a jump. I don't think they need to move up that far in the draft. I tend to think if there's a player that they're going to want to target, they'll most likely be around at 8 or 9. 5 or 6, that's getting up into the top quarterback territory. I'd be surprised if they wanted to get up that high. Move up for Derwin James? I tend to doubt it. Now, I talked about this on my podcast today. It's really hard to give any kind of semblance of an intelligent response here because we don't have any clue as to how Gutekunst feels about any of these prospects, what their grades are on any of these guys. I know how I feel about him. I think Derwin James is really good. I wouldn't trade up for him. But, sitting at 14, I think they're going to let the draft fall to them. I would be very surprised if they did jump up to get somebody. Of course, that's why I would be surprised because I wouldn't expect it. But it all depends. Gutekunst feels there's somebody that's sitting there that's going to be transformational, maybe a once-in-a-generation type talent, and he has a real strong conviction about it. And maybe he jumps up and does it. Let the quarterbacks run. We should have someone really good fall to us. Russell, I agree. I think it sets up very nicely for them. It's not just the quarterbacks too. It's Nelson, the Notre Dame guard. Possibility now they're talking McGlinchey could go in the top 10, the tackle from Notre Dame. So there's offensive prospects that could be pushing lots of quality defensive talent down to Green Bay. And as I've discussed before, the one real danger for the Packers is Washington, sitting there right one spot before them at 13. They have a lot of similar needs. They have a lot of holes in their roster that align with where the Packers' holes are. So there's a very good possibility that there could be someone the Packers really want or covet, and they miss out on that player by one spot. Which, obviously, going back to what we were just talking about, you got to think that's a big possible driver for Gutekunst to jump up. You're talking about, is he going to jump up? I don't know if he would jump up to 7 or 8 or somewhere around there, but I do think there's a possibility he tries to get ahead of Washington if he sees someone falling that he truly covets and knows that there's a possibility that Washington might take him. Need to draft a tight end in either the 3rd or 4th round? Andy, I'd agree. I wouldn't be surprised if they looked at one in the 2nd round, depending on the comparable value and where they have the grades. The tight end position is something they've neglected in the draft recently. Obviously, they've swung for the fences the last 3 years in free agency, but it is high time they find their own and get their own homegrown talent at that position. Let's hope Dan Snyder weighs in and blows it for the Skins. Always a possibility. Oh boy, sorry guys. All right, I'm gonna have to jump. Work never ends, but I thought I'd jump on here and talk to Davon House. Thanks so much for the questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to yours. They do fly by. You'll see somebody from Packers News has now posted our story on Davon House signing with the Packers. Make sure you check that out. Tom Silverstein's all over it. In the meantime, check that out. Listen to my podcast. That just dropped as well. Got tons of stuff up at PackersNews.com. If it's happening with or around the Packers, we've got it covered for you. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'll talk to you later.